Obviously, the world has and countries have taken a lot of positive steps in certain ways, but there are also a lot of things to improve on. So building upon that, Jordan, what are there certain like trends or certain changes you see in the status quo, and what is at stake?
Yeah, thank you. Um, it's interesting, the thoughts around the pandemic and this idea of returning to normal, so-called, returning, in which I would call the status quo. And in my view, we will neither return to that, nor do I desire to return to that. I think that the reality is that the status quo, again, has had all of these layers of exploitation, as John was just sharing, and that has been shared so far on this panel, and that we already know that all of this didn't just pop up in 2020. And so in the status quo, many Black and Brown and Indigenous folks in the so-called US have been living in food apartheid. A lot of people talk about food deserts in this country, and places where people don't have access to grocery stores or access to food. Some folks who I've connected with either in person or just over the internet, Leah Penniman and Karen Washington, talk about food apartheid because it is structural. It is institutional that these Black and Brown communities don't have access to quality food. I think the other thing is when we talk about access, and to John's point, what is our power to actually determine our food systems, to determine our educational systems? And so for me, it's not just about I can afford that service, or I can afford access, or I can, physically go over there to get it. It's about, is it in our community, and are we in control of it? Do we get to have a say over who gets this job? Do we get to have a say over how decisions are made? So in terms of trends, I think about food. I think about the importance of land, and that increasingly land is being privatized, and this big conglomerate of businesses can take all these lands and resources. And again, this isn't something that's new, but my understanding is that these trends are actually intensifying the gap between who has what resources, whether it be land, if it's financial, political power, that those power differentials are actually expanding. And so I see that trending, unfortunately. And I also think that it's really important to note that, there is this balance of, positive and negative, so-called good and evil. And so as we see, these negative things ramping up, I think we're also seeing in the same way an equal and opposite response. And so the fact that I've been witnessing so many different Black-led food growing, food distributing networks, organizations that are working cooperatively, that are bringing resources back to those local communities, that's all happening. There are people of resources, white folks who have land, who know that that land was inherited through the enslavement of African peoples. And so they are actually giving up that land and working to return that land to the land's original keepers, who are the indigenous folks to these lands where I am. And so we see people doing this. We see people creating funds to make sure that Black and indigenous people have access to their cultural knowledge of herbalism, so that we can actually heal ourselves. That was something, again, all the things that have been, that folks have worked to strip away from, the oppressed, from the oppressors taking from the oppressed, or exploiters taking from the exploited, knowledge of how to heal ourselves, to grow our food, all of these things. I'm actively seeing the trends of people creating space, making sure that Black and indigenous folks, are leading that, have access to that knowledge, are rebuilding that knowledge for themselves and for their communities.
Thank you for that. Finally, moving on to Vincent. So what are some trends that you currently see, and what what is at stake?
Right. Well, you know what? I wanna add a couple of things on what John and Jordan just said. Number one, exploitation, which is very true. In throughout human history, it doesn't matter when. You can go back as far as 200 BC. There's exploitation are always out there, right? But the thing that you can actually help that, it's knowledge. It's what Jordan just mentioned. If you have knowledge, then you can make that change. Now, and in order to continue commit yourself to get that knowledge, you have to have a dream. Basically, my dream was to make sure that I get educated, to make sure that I will be better, to make sure that I can communicate with people in Australia on an equal level. You know, I mean, this is passed on to me from my parents when I was a little boy, and I pass it on to my kids as well. You know, everything in life, whether money, food, water, or anything, you can have it, a lot of it today, and then lose it tomorrow. Someone can have millions of dollars today, and then 2 days from now, probably all disappear. You have all your food and you eat it, it's all disappear. But knowledge is the only thing that will stay with you forever. No one can ever take that away from you. And with knowledge, then you learn how to defend yourself. You learn how to not being exploited by others. And knowledge has to be given out across the board, not just one privileged person to the others. Take an example of a country in Africa, right? Guinea is a perfect example. The current president, I can't pronounce his name, but Alpha, right? Alpha. He is well educated in Paris, in France. He came back. He's supposed to be running better than the previous government, who actually a military kind of style government. But guess what he did? Because he's the only one who had the knowledge, he then started to exploit all the others. So you got to get other people to have the same knowledge, the same way of thinking, know how to improve your own life. So for me, what I learned is that, yes, people will always exploit to try to get as much as of everything from me. But because have the knowledge, I know the know-how how this happening, I can actually protect it myself from being exploited, right? And the thing that needs to change, as I said, with these 2 points, with this knowledge that passed on to everyone, that they get to know, think for themselves, then you can change. For example, you know, in Cambodia, we have the same government running the country for the past 35 years, almost 40 now, but no one actually doing anything about it, right? If every one of us around the world, like people in America, people in London, in US, and in UK, sorry, in Australia and France, know about all this and participate in that, you can make your government to help Cambodian or to help African country by, you know, if the government doesn't help that particular country or help solve that problem all around the world, like climate change and things like that, you can vote that government out. You can vote, remove that person out and put someone who actually willing to do this in charge. So that's how I looked at it. And this is where I encourage every country who actually have a voting system that they should go and vote for change. They don't just sit there at home and complain, because it doesn't solve the problem. You got to go there and make that change yourself, even though it's a little tiny drop of water, but that little drop of water can ripple all across the ocean. So that's where I believe it can change.
Okay, thank you for that. And so yes, definitely. So being more informed and getting more knowledge is obviously going to help you to create more change in the problems that we see right now. So this transitions to the next question, which is, where do we go from here, and what can we do on a community level as well as on a global level? So could Bishop John please answer first?
Well, thank you, Jolene. I think where we need to go, we need to contextualize the condition we are in or we are at, as the contributors have been saying, whereby we need to utilize the knowledge acquired and the education we have had, because knowledge and education are two different things. History educates us, and we get the knowledge from classical education. But it's how we do apply that knowledge. How do we make that knowledge transform not only us individually, but transform our society and move our society from phase 1 to 2 in development, and for all of us together as a nation, make a destiny. I think you will be interested to learn that Rwanda, after the genocide against the Tutsi and a long history from colonization to being divided, to wars, to killings, to exodus of refugees in different countries. Today, from here, as we move, the Rwandan leaders have chosen to get a togetherness, a coordinated move for recovery and development, and established a government of national unity. It's not an issue of universities who has so many degrees. It's where do we want to go as Rwandese together. 2, we need to rediscover who we are and rebuild our identity. We have identity as Rwandans. We have an identity as individuals. But what is more important is our joint existence as Rwandese, and what we want to be, and what we want to do to be what we want to be, and how do we establish and build a nation and the dignity of our people. And therefore, what we need to do and what we are doing for 26 years now, we are healing the wounds of the past. And at the same time, we are joining hands, building that nation, building our government, building our governance, building our justice, building our national security, and also building an economy which we have to protect together. As you know, you might have read that Rwanda is the one of the countries in Africa, few, fighting corruption. We have no luxury to entertain corruption. We have been exploited, our resources have been taken away. The little left, we cannot subject it to looting again. So by doing that, we are building a nation, and we are training our youth, our young ones, to take responsibility, because when the adults go, they will remain in charge of the steering of growing the nation into the future. So I think, Jolene, you are asking a very fundamental question, that what do we do from now? And we don't have to borrow. If we talk about governance, if we talk about democracy, if we talk about human rights, nobody will give us the standard of rights that we need to have. We have to build, we have to establish, we have to protect our rights as the people of Rwanda. Knowing that we also have to relate it to Kenya, we have to relate it to Uganda, we have to relate it to Congo, we have to relate it to Burundi, but we have to relate it to others, or for Europe for that matter, or the world, the global village. But we need to be who we are in order to relate it to others. We need to be able to build our economy in order to relate it to other economies of the world. We need to go in the market knowing what we have and what we need to have. Nobody has to impose us. For instance, we are talking about food security. What kind of food security shall we have when we subject our resources to be looted by other people? Take raw materials from our land, and then they sell the residues, the leftovers to us at a higher price than that which they took our raw materials at. So we really need to be able to know when we are talking about injustice, exploitation, and we don't have to surrender to evils. It's high time we need to be able to analytically and critically, for those of you who are doing research, you have to let the world know that exploitation exists and it is evil. And therefore, be able to prepare people to know how to use their knowledge to protect their dignity, protect who they are, protect their future, and protect their well-being. You know, nobody can give you the dignity. You can't buy it in any market in the world. You have to engage, develop it, and fight for it. Because the dignity cannot be given by anybody. Or the respect, for that matter. Or the economy of your nation, for that matter. And anybody who is fueling chaos in your country so that they may have a chance to continue to help you lose focus on from your development, then they will do it in order to take your resources. And this is what has been happening in Africa, in many African countries, even to this day. So having a master's or a PhD from Paris or from Washington, D.C., or from Tokyo, where we are discussing things from, and you come back to Rwanda, that borrowed knowledge has to be brought into the contextual realities of Rwanda in order to develop Rwanda, and be able to sell the ideas, the knowledge acquired, and make it local to the locals so that they can apply it to develop themselves. So from here, I think, Jolene, is we need to be able to create a sustainable transformation. Build African markets, build Rwanda markets, build African markets. Trade with whom we think we are bargaining properly, not imposing us what they want from us. Or imposing us what they want to give to us. We have lived in the world of impositions, the world of exploitations. So those of you who are doing research need to be able to engage the realities of the transformation of life. The world has leaked and suffered long enough. There must be redemption and transformation. Thank you.
Thank you for that powerful speech. Yes, I definitely agree that in the face of problems, even if you do have a certain degree from this famous university, it's always important to still keep your identity and apply your knowledge and what you have learned to places that actually matter. So moving on to Jordan, could you please explain how we can go on from now, building on to what Bishop John had said?
Yeah, well, I'll first say I co-sign all of that that Bishop John just shared. So all of that. And I think I'll just add on what really has been on my mind are these two pieces, related to food and through this lens of land and shared ownership, if you will. On one hand, there's this need to understand who is controlling land, who owns that land, how is it being shared, who's making decisions about it, how is it being treated, how is it passed down. And so there is sort of this legal aspect to that in terms of ownership within the current systems that exist. And so how are we understanding that? How are we increasing the land that is in the hands of those who have been marginalized and exploited for so long? At the same time, for me, I wonder how we move away from this concept of land ownership. For me, the earth cannot be owned. We can't own resources. You can't own a river or a mountain or a street. You can't own the land. And so I think about, how do we balance these pieces of, in terms of the existing structures, there is this necessity to understand the legality of ownership of land access and tenure and all of that. And also, how are we evolving our understanding of, again, our relationship to the earth as co-creators, as co-collaborators, for me, rather than this idea of like human dominion over the more than human world. The other piece, again, related to sharing and collective, again, so-called collective ownership, thinking about the principles of cooperative business, whether it's for an operation that is profiting for one that is a so-called nonprofit, whatever the institutional structure is, how can the way that decisions are made, the way that work is distributed, the way that that organization evolves, how can that be something that the collective, everyone who is working there and a part of the organization, has power in? And so often in cooperative models, if it's a business, you have one person, one vote. And so if there's a major organizational decision that has to be made about hiring, about what people earn at that job, about we're in a global pandemic, do we shut down the office? Those are decisions that, in my mind, the collective would make, and not just the executive director or the president or the hierarchy of command. And so for me, that those traditional forms of hierarchy are often rooted in continued exploitation of those who are at the bottom. So even in the way, again, that we work together and do our work, how is that one that is trying to move us into a place of sharing and more shared dignity and humanity? So those are the two aspects, I guess. And then the third that I'll end with is just around care. When we think about economics, which is really just the management of home, I think about, this flow of resources, and I think about care. Because for me, ultimately, I just want to live a life that I feel well and nurtured and healthy in. And so how am I caring for others? How are they caring for me? And how is the way that we manage our home just based on that aspect of care?
Thank you, Jordan. Moving on to Vincent. So building on to what Jordan had just said, how do we move forward from now on both a community level as well as the global level?
Well, what John said was exactly what I had in mind as well. When he made the comparison between knowledge and education, which is I think it's well done. To me, knowledge and education, are two different things. Just because someone graduated with a master's degree, it doesn't mean he's better than me or you, right? He also have to combine with the knowledge, the wisdom that you have, right? We all want to be independent. We don't want someone to come and exploit us. So, and that's why I said, when you have the knowledge, you know exactly what your opponents want to do with it, then you will learn something. You will be able to defend yourself to doing something better. There's one other thing that Jordan just said about these economics and finance. And unfortunately, I graduated with a finance degree, so I mean that it's unfortunate that this world will always, that the money, that the wealth, the money will always be in the middle of every discussion. I mean, this is unavoidable. I mean, seriously, it's unavoidable. But in order for us to spread the wealth evenly, right? In order for us to make life better for everyone, it has to come from within. Within the individual, within the government, within the country. No other country can come and should be coming in and exploiting one country. No other country should come in and give money to you. I mean, when someone gives you money, you should know that nothing comes for free. Right? If they give you money, there must be something that they want from you. And in order to be able to understand that, you got the knowledge, you have to be able to, all the forces come from within. The same thing about this planet, climate warming discussion. We as a people on this earth have to actually do it ourselves. No one else can do it for us. So it has to come from the inside of every single person, and inside of every organization, and inside every government and country and this world. And this is how we can move forward and make the world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Moving on to a more general question about the current situation with COVID-19. So as everyone has said before, with exploitation, things like that, how do you think COVID-19 might, for example, affect certain groups more than others and exacerbate current issues such as exploitation and people who literally don't even have food or a roof over their heads?
Well, yeah, I mean, the COVID-19, it happened so fast, and it lasts very long. It stayed here for 6 months now, and I don't see that it's going to go away very soon. Funny enough, that today I also read an article, a financial research. They interview a PCW, right? A company called PCW. They interview all the CEOs all around the world. There are 69 of them, I think, or something like that. And every single one of them have the same concern that this COVID-19 will change the way they do business, to change the behavior of every single person on this planet. And yes, the government of each country and the health organization and also the United Nations should make sure that this vaccine or medicine or whatever we call them when we found it, it has to be shared all across the board, and the government of each country and the rich country should bear the burden of paying for this production, rather than me as an individual pay for everything. Because otherwise, some of the poor people in a poor country or in a poor community cannot afford that. All right, they cannot afford it. They won't be able to afford that. So imagine today in Japan, if you want to go and take a PCR, it will cost you $500 just to do the test. I mean, if someone live in a poor community, you would not have that money. So I think in order to solve this problem going forward, the government and some of the rich nations should put out the money and produce this vaccine and give it away for free. Everyone should get it for free. That's how I see it. I mean, maybe some other people have different ideas, but that's how I would see it in order to move on and get everyone on the same level. You cannot say you have to pay this much for this or you have to pay that. Well, the rich people have to pay for it, but then the government should make it available for everyone, not just for someone who has the money. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. Yes, definitely. Like, it doesn't matter if only a few people get the vaccine and get cured. If everyone else are literally still have the virus, it doesn't really matter. So we have to learn how to collaborate together and make sure that everyone gets the cure. So moving on to Jordan. So what do we think we can do under the current COVID-19 crisis?
I think something that was, at the onset, at least here, when, quarantining was ramping up and it was like, oh, this is really serious. We need to take this seriously back in March. Probably within the month after, if I remember just kind of being like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Feel that feeling of the amplified impacts of everything. It's like, I'm already this gay Black person trying to survive, and now I have this and I'm away from my family, and oh my gosh, what's happening? How are people going to be able to provide for themselves? How are we going to make sure we get food to each other? And so I think what I've witnessed is in this time of this pandemic, the increase in development of mutual aid networks. And so folks who were already doing this and who were like, we need to do this even more. People are listening now. Yes, we actually can't rely on all of these systems to get us everything that we need. And in fact, what have we lost by exporting our power and our energy and our expectations to, the markets and to, the ordering systems and to all of these different services that, in my experience, are getting people the things that they need. And with things shutting down, it's like, oh, we actually don't have access to that, or how am I going to get this thing? And so I think, again, really exposing the fragile nature of the systems that have been set up to service people. And even this idea of services for everyday life, this separation between just the basic aspects of living in dignity and the wealth that you need in order to access that. And so really seeing that exposed even more than I think it has been recently during this pandemic. And so how are those mutual aid networks really ramping up and developing, where you have so many things that are happening there. You have communities coming together. You have people working together and connecting with each other. You have people watching out and caring for each other, looking over, oh, do my neighbors have what they need? Does my community have what they need? You also are creating new institutions that are locally based, that are community based. Maybe they're not operating in these economic structures. Not the idea, it's not that they're profitable. And when compared to, something that would be viable in this country's economic system, something like a mutual aid network, that's not going to be able to go head to head to some kind of other major food distribution network. And so for me, it's like, that's not the point. The point is to actually fundamentally reimagine the way that we're living together with each other and on this planet. So yes, there should be ways that we can just give food to each other, to our neighbors, and not have to pay for it. There should be these ways that we can build community gardens for each other. People want to know how to grow their own food, and no, my little small garden outside of my house or on my windowsill isn't going to feed me and my family, but it begins to spark a seed, to plant a seed of, what is this active growing food? How could I link up with other people and maybe do something on a slightly bigger scale, not like let's scale up and profit, but how can we share in the labor and then share in the benefit for the folks who I'm living next to? And so planting those seeds, building that knowledge, returning us to the knowledge of how food is grown, where it comes from, and that we have this intimate relationship with the land that we can really reconnect with. So those are some of the things that come to mind in terms of, what we can do, again, in response to the fact that these impacts are different. It depends on where you're living. Are you in a so-called low-income community? Are you a Black person or a brown person or an Indigenous person in this country? Well, we know that COVID is impacting us, impacting our communities at higher rates. Why? Because of a history of food apartheid and ongoing food apartheid, because of lack of access to proper healthcare, to culturally relevant healthcare, to a health system that actually understands a history of enslavement, that understands a history of exploitation. Systems that push low-income folks, Black and brown folks, into specific types of jobs that, don't give health benefits, don't give support, don't allow for time off, are requiring people to come in even in a pandemic. And so all of these things we know are just being exposed and amplified. And at the same time, I think I'm witnessing people coming together saying, we know exactly what to do in this case. We believe in ourselves, we believe in our dignity, we believe in our right to vitality and our right to thrive. And that's exactly what we're going to create.
Thank you for that, Jordan. So yes, definitely COVID-19 has exposed a lot of problems that were currently ignored or unseen by a lot of people. But at the same time, because these issues are exposed, people focus on them more and think about the problems more, and they're more likely to have more empathy for example, their neighbor next door and help these people, the people around them. So finally, moving on to Bishop John. So how do you think COVID-19 has specifically impacted certain groups, and how do we move on from there?
I think, Jolene, I don't believe that the pandemic, Corona and COVID-19 is an African problem or a given group problem. It's a human problem. We believe very strongly that anybody, any person can prevent or can attract, can be sick of, and can die of COVID-19 if there is no carefulness done on his part, and in case contracted, is not treated. And it has proven, many people thought that Africa would be swiped clean by COVID-19 by now, as people were thinking about it, but it's not the case. I want you to know that I will give you practical examples. In Rwanda, we have had a total by yesterday, but one, a total of 2,140 cases of COVID-19, And we have had 1,346 recovered from it. And we have had, today, we have active who are being treated, 787. And in 6 months, we are very sad to have lost 7 people to COVID-19 in the whole country. And Rwanda is a tiny country, landlocked. It's not economically very powerful. As you know, we are recovering from the genocide only 26 years. Our economy is growing steadily, but it is still young economy. So what I want to impart on you is that whether African community, white community, Asian community, black, blue, whatever it is, we need to take serious responsibility for our people. Today, there are checkups in the whole Rwanda. We had a period of shutdown, weeks of shutdown. We have now areas, pockets of the country that are isolated for a period of time. When they have cases, they examine the people, they treat the sick ones, they release them when they are healed, but somebody has to be responsible for the people. So it's like this issue which was proposed that the vaccine should be treated, should be possibly tested on the Africans. And our answer was no. It should be tested on humans who are voluntarily willing to, not Africans per se. And we have refused that because this pandemic is human, it's for humans, it kills humanity, it destroys human beings. Every human being, every nation, every community has to be responsible for itself to protect itself. And for what our beloved friend was saying, that the rich countries have to pay for us, or for those who claim to be poor. That's not right either. Suppose those rich countries want you not to be treated, and they have that money, what do? You cannot therefore surrender your life to the rich. The rich can give you when they want, you can persuade them to, but it cannot be a right to claim their money on you. So if we cannot have a contradictory approach to life. We have to take responsibility for our citizens, and we have to take responsibility for their health. Rich countries like America cannot be imposed on the demand that they go and pay money for the treatment of another country somewhere on the continent. But America should take care of itself and its own. And I think America is also having a problem with the COVID-19. As Europe did, as Italy did, as you know the statistics of the COVID. It's not African. We don't want even that to be mentioned on us. It's human. We share it. We share the fears. We share the joys of recovering from it. But some people think what Rwanda is doing is that our leaders are taking responsibility to even contribute money from their own salaries to treat the people of Rwanda. From the president to the local worker in the country, surrendered their monthly salary to treat the people, to be able to work, get the machines to treat, get the equipment for the nurses, get everything in place so that they can protect the nation. So far, we are saddened by losing 7 people in 6 months. But there are some other rich countries who have lost thousands of people. It all depends on the attitude you have towards your people and your responsibility you take to protect your own. And this pandemic is come, but there may be another one coming. You never know. So what do you say about these pandemics? You cannot depend on the rich. And by the way, these vaccines can be having more effects as much as COVID may have. So why do they test it on Africans? Okay, I think, Jolene, that's what I think we need to do. We need to take responsibility for our own. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I definitely agree with everything you just said. And the unique thing about the virus is it doesn't care about your identity or like what background you come from or like where you're from. The virus affects every single person. And just like a quick thing I want to share. So a few days ago, I came back from Wuhan, where people said the virus originated from. And I was visiting some of my relatives there. And at the very start of the pandemic, people called the virus, for example, the Wuhan virus or like the Chinese virus. And then when I talked with the relatives there, it was really similar to what you just said. It doesn't matter where it came from or like what specific person might be associated with it. It just matters that the human race should be able to deal with it regardless of people's separate identities and things like that. So thank you everyone for that great conversation we just had.
Thank you.
Thank you all for honoring this.
Well, thank you.
This
It's been a
forum.
joy to be with you and talk to you.
Yeah, let's keep this wisdom flowing, everybody. This is a really, really important conversation. And just for those of us that are going to hear this afterwards, we're moving through a process also that really calls back to indigenous wisdom of healing and grieving together. And there is a lot being lost right now. And you know, Jordan, I'm sure you can resonate with this, the work that reconnects. Joanna Macy, Lydia Violet, tomorrow morning, real time in Tokyo, is going to be facilitating a process actually supported by an incredible woman named Tabitha, also from Uganda, Rwanda, who she supports women who are survivors of sexual violence. And she's going to be helping us really tune into, you know, what does it mean to grieve through that and to shed that. And Lydia Violet is a masterful protege of Joanna Macy, who is a climate change activist and who is the author of the work that reconnects. And so what we're really attempting to do here is bring together this great indigenous wisdom and the tradition of grieving together and metabolizing our grief. What we're doing here with the Global Summit is we're just looking to nature to think, how can we be, not think, but actually practice, how can we be more of a decentralized autonomous ecosystem? How can we not become another NGO tribal, you know, thing that's trying to get up on the next one? You know, how do we continuously strive to be more inclusive? And, you know, get it, like our lives are a dot. We are here now. This is our opportunity. And, you know, whatever we can do together this week, whatever in your own communities. So I want to honor the resilience that each of you have shown. You know, Vincent, your healing journey, your reflection, Jordan, for getting in, you know, interrelations, helping communities and, you know, that are having racial issues, helping allies, helping groups understand what it means to decolonize. Because until we get that consciousness, it's going to be really hard to figure out how to live together. And Bishop John, you know, thanks for being an avatar and continuing to shed your wisdom and being with us. It's such an honor to have you in our legacy. Yeah, so I'll leave with that and continue the journey, and let's just keep growing this conversation. And so I just think this is so beautiful. I just want to really celebrate Jolene, you bringing your passion and reaching out to us with our team, you know, saying, I want to do this. I have a gift to give, you know, and like whoever you are out there listening to this, like you have a gift. So what is your gift to give? And let's, you know, how can we support each other in bringing your gift? So yeah, thank you.